ready to organize your amazing ideas into a powerful book? It's time to write your book. Welcome to The Right Hour, nonfiction tips from the right coach with Joyce Glass, where you can learn the business and craft of writing.
Welcome to episode 604 of The Right Hour. I absolutely adore our guest today. I met her last month at the North Carolina Christian Writers Conference, and she is an amazing speaker and writer. Today, we discuss the giants we face in writing. Writing can be exhilarating and frustrating, and sometimes at the same time. Karen gives us some tools to overcome the giants we face when writing. Karen Porter is an international speaker, a successful businesswoman, and the author of 6 books, including her newest, If You Give a Girl a Giant. She is president of Advanced Writers and Speakers Association, serves on several boards, and coaches aspiring writers and speakers. She and her husband George own Bold Vision Books, a traditional publishing company, and Stone Oak Publishing, an author-contributor Christian publishing company. Karen says her greatest achievement is her marriage to George. In her spare time, she follows her lifelong quest to find the perfect purse. There's another reason why we get along so well. I love purses too. So, may today's episode inspire and encourage you on your writing journey. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the next episode of The Right Hour. Today, I am excited to have with me Karen Porter. I recently got to know her better at the North Carolina Christian Writers Conference. I had to think about that a second. And she was a pleasure to meet there, and she did a talk that I absolutely love. So we're going to talk about some of her talk today, but we're going to get to know her a little better. And Karen, I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you. Delighted.
Awesome. Well, tell us a bit about your journey to becoming a writer and a publisher, because I know it was not a path you were actually seeking.
Actually, no. I was in the corporate world for a long time, and more than 30 years, actually. And I was not thinking, although I had written sort of privately and put what I wrote in a drawer and never showed it to anybody most of my life. But just a few years before I left that job, I got opportunities to speak, and then I started writing. And so I started writing, really giving it to somebody and asking for publication in the mid-2000s, 2005 or so. And I got some magazine articles and then a book contract, and I wrote a book called I'll Bring the Chocolate, which is about, it compares all the luscious qualities of women's friendship with all the luscious qualities of chocolate.
I didn't know you had that book. You do?
Yeah.
Do you know what's on my Facebook description? It says lover of chocolate.
There you are. That's you. So I need to send that to you.
I need that book. Yes.
It's a lot of fun, and it sounds a little fluffy, but it's actually a very deep book that is about friendship, and it's got deep concepts in it, like faith and like loyalty and like forgiveness, and I mean, it's got some deep stuff in it, but it's all couched around the fun of chocolate. So.
Sounds wonderful.
It was fun.
So then that led you, how did you get into publishing? Because I know that there's a whole story there too.
As I said, I had this job and I was working in a corporation, and I had gone really high in the corporate, on the corporate ladder. I had gone really high to vice president of international marketing, and so it was a big, fancy job with a lot of responsibility and a lot of perks and a lot of fun and a lot of really, really great opportunities to travel the world and meet heads of state and all kinds of opportunities like that. Well, at one point, a foreign company bought our company, and they gradually removed all of the U.S. management and began to manage it in the foreign company. country. So I was eliminated. And so that was a really hard time for me. I needed to heal because I thought I would keep that job forever.
Right.
And I really kind of lost my identity and, who I was. So I had needed the time to heal. And I had been writing some and had been helping different people with writing in various parts of that. And so I got this opportunity to work for the Texas Institute of Transportation, which who knew we had one? I didn't know. They had reports and that needed to be edited, and they contacted me and asked me if I would edit them. So for a long time after losing that big job, I edited that work, at home in my pajamas while I healed. And so then that editing led to me getting some certification as a coach and doing more editing. And eventually I helped some authors, edit their books all the way through to self-publishing them. And then that eventually led to my husband and I forming a new company called Bold Vision Books, which is a traditional publishing company. And so that's sort of where it started. It just started it evolved from a few jobs here and there, and then eventually it became this company. So we've been in business now about 8 years, and we've just been amazed at how fast it has grown and how fast we've grown and all of the various ways that God has blessed it. So that's kind of how we made that switch.
Yeah, sounds wonderful. And
it's kind of crazy if you want to know the truth, because we were like, we don't have, we don't have any money, we don't have any employees, we don't have any machines, we don't have any warehouses, we don't know how to do publishing. Okay, let's do it.
Why not, right?
Yeah, let's do it. So that's how it started, but we learned a lot from those.
Sometimes those are the best ways to start, though. The ignorance is bliss kind of thing, because you don't know what you don't know, and so it's good.
Yeah, if we'd have planned, we probably have never done it. So
yeah, if you sat around and planned it too long, you're like, oh, this ain't gonna happen.
So true, so very, very true.
So, well, recently you released a new book, which I absolutely love, and I've given it to our women's group coordinator here to see if she'll do it at our church. And it's If You Give a Girl a Giant, Fighting for Your Life. Yes.
If You Give a Girl a Giant. And we do have a study guide, a 6-week study guide too. So
I know, I'm excited
for our group to do it together.
Yes, and I can't wait to do that and go through it. But tell us a little bit about that book and kind of where it was birthed from. Where did that come from that you said, hey, I want to write a book about a giant?
Well, it took a long time for the book to come about, but it started just in my daily Bible reading. And I came across this passage in 2 Samuel where it listed some Philistine guys who attacked David and his mighty men. And I began to study a little bit about who they were, and it turns out that they were brothers of Goliath. So I sort of surmised that David picked up 5 stones when he went to go after Goliath. He really only needed 1. Why did he pick up the other 4? And I would like to think that it's because he thought he might have to fight those other 4 brothers at that time. Which he didn't have to. They ran away, but they came back. And so these giants came back to attack David. And each time they came into his camp to attack him, one of his mighty men, he had many, 600 or 800 of them, one of them rose up to slay the giant. So then I got a little more interested in it, and I thought, this got to be something more than just some names and lists in a book. So I began to look up the meanings of the names and discovered something amazing. Each of the 4 giants represents a giant that we face, you and me, right now, today, in this time period. So, for instance, the first giant that attacked, his name was Ishni-Benob. And if you look up his name, it means to sit down, tarry, and don't move. Well, obviously, that's the giant of discouragement. And discouragement is something we face every day. I don't know anybody who doesn't get discouraged. We all get discouraged. and I get discouraged easily. Just some little something can go wrong, and I'm down the tubes, discouraged. But discouragement is a real giant for all of us.
Right.
And so we have to face it. Well, we think, and we're told by our society and by the experts, that the way to get out of discouragement is to, sort of get some self-confidence or pull yourself up by your bootstraps or go somewhere and get a new attitude or get a new location or find some new friends or even take a pill. That's how you get out of discouragement. Well, God doesn't say that's the answer, because if you look at the guy who killed Ishni-Benob, his name was Abishai, and he represents the faithfulness of God. And if you think about that, Joyce, that's the real answer.
It is.
Discouragement. That's the real answer. That's God's answer to discouragement. So if you're discouraged and you're down and you can't pull yourself up, just start remembering how faithful God is. And remember that that's his nature. That's who he is. He was faithful before. He's faithful now. He will always be faithful. And that will pull you out of the pit of discouragement.
Yeah. And that's true. That has helped me many times, because there's been so many things that has happened in my life that when I look back, I'm like, I could not have orchestrated those series of events if I wanted to. And God worked it all out. And one was like the birth of my son, which is a long story I won't get into now. But anytime I get discouraged, I think about, if God can work all that out, he can work this out, And it is amazing to watch him do that.
And when you cling to that faithfulness of God, then you don't, you know that discouragement is just a giant, and you can just slay the giant with saying, you can't discourage me because I know that God is faithful. And it really is the tool. It's his weapon. It's his weapon against it. All four brothers are that way.
Yes.
And it's so exciting to see how deep and rich the Bible is, even when you don't realize it, when you think you're just looking at some names.
Yeah, they're just a bunch of names. And I have to say, I did not realize until you taught that, and I've studied the life of David many times, that Goliath had four brothers. I did not realize. And then when you went into their names, it was kind of like, oh, wow, that is so cool,
Yeah, I didn't know it either. And I often thought, why did he pick up 5 stones? I'm always thinking stupid questions like that. Why did he do that? But maybe that's the reason. And we certainly see it over the second season.
It makes sense. We may not know till eternity, but it makes sense why he would do that. So this study then and book is about overcoming these giants in our life.
Yeah, it's not just any giant that will come to you, but it's these four specific giants and how to overcome them. And I sort of weave in there my story that I mentioned a while ago about being in the corporate world and about all of that took me into discouragement and later into defeat and fear, which are the next two giants, and understanding just how God's answer is really the answer to all those things. And a person might not have the same experience I did with my job. I hope nobody did, actually. But you do have your experiences that can cause you to go into discouragement or defeat or the others. But it's important to know that God has an answer that is not like the world's answer.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I love that. And for those that weren't at the North Carolina Christian Writers Conference, they didn't get to hear all of your story. But just so that people know, this wasn't like, oh, she just up and lost a job one day. This was like her life work, and it sucked the life out of her. My husband went through something similar when the economy went down. He had been working for a company.
It really wasn't a job. It was my identity. I was corporate female, and I was probably overly proud of having done that as a woman, to have risen up that high in a company, a big major company. And, there was just a lot. Who in the world would I be? In my heart, I couldn't figure out who would I be. I thought I had nothing left. I had no identity, no purpose, no nothing. Because it wasn't just a job to me, it was life. Right.
And it was everything to you besides the Lord. And I'm sure
I think my brother probably said it best one time. He said, you would have never quit that job to do what God wanted you to do. And he's right. I probably would have never, because it was just too important to me and everything else. I'm not exactly proud of that, but it's true.
Yeah. Sometimes, I think God does that in all of our lives, that he'll rip away things that are too important to us, so we can see what's really important for us.
Exactly.
And that's happened in my life and in my husband's life and just different people that I know. I think that is something that God uses. Sometimes he's got what I call rattle our cage to get our attention, because we're so busy going our own way that, I don't need that. What is that?
Exactly. So, I like that rattle my cage, because that's what he does.
Exactly. So the next question is, and this is something that, writers have giants in their lives too. So what are some of the giants that writers have to deal with? And obviously discouragement is one of them.
There's so many with being a writer, because first of all, it's a lonely job because you do it pretty much alone. Mm-hmm. And so for that, I would really encourage anybody who's a writer to get a critique group that you can share sort of what your life is like, and that you can share your writing and get feedback and just have that camaraderie with people who understand what it's like to be alone writing. So that's one of the worst parts of being a writer, is being alone. Mm-hmm. I think another big problem is procrastination. It's so easy to say, I'm going to write tomorrow, or I'm going to write this later, or I've got all these ideas to write, but it's not easy to sit yourself, as we say, sit your seat in the seat and actually do the writing. And to solve that problem, you probably, we need a schedule. We need an appointed time to write, and it has to become something sacred to us, that we don't turn away from it like that.
Right. Be intentional about it.
And then the other really big problem for writers is rejection, because so many things that you turn in to a publisher or to an agent, and they say, this just won't do it. This just won't get it.
Right.
And you poured your heart into it, and it's like a baby, and then they say, no, we don't want to publish that. And that is really
You have an ugly baby. We don't, we don't like your baby.
And that is really tough to take. And you can take heart from the fact that most every writer who's been successful has got a long, long list of rejections on their resume, because I've read stories about, like, Moby Dick was rejected 150 times or something like that, and other people have had, just if you read those stories, it's unbelievable how many times they've been rejected before it finally hit.
Well, and think about that. Yeah, I'm not a Stephen King fan, but I read his book on writing, and he talks about that too. Yeah. Many, many rejections, and nobody now thinks of Stephen King as having rejections. Like, who would reject Stephen King?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, even the greats before they were great, and probably, and I'm sure everything they do isn't perfect now either. They don't. No one always bats 1,000. That's just the way it goes. So keep that in mind and perspective, that it's not this Pollyanna, I write this, the world's going to love it, and the first publisher I talk to is going to want it, and life will be beautiful. No,
and I'll quit my day job, and I'm going to make a fortune, and all of those things. Those are just not true.
Right.
So don't tell yourself that.
Right. Let's get based in reality. But what can writers do to overcome some of these giants in their life? Defeat and rejection.
I think one of the things I've done that has been really helpful to me is try to understand how I write and how to figure out my life schedule. So I have a busy life with our company. We have 4 companies, so we're busy running them. We travel all the time, sometimes 40 weeks out of the year. So that's another issue that causes a problem. And then I have a family. I have kids and grandkids, and I'm very involved in my church and in my community and my neighborhood. So there's just so many areas where I am swamped. How am I going to get time to write? So here's what one day I thought, I'm really going to figure this out. So I took a day and I started like from 7 to 8 in the morning. I'm going to read my Bible. From 8 to 9, I'm going to check my emails. And then from 9 to 11, I'm going to write. And then from 11 to 12, I'm going to do this. And all the way down the schedule. I just had every hour planned. Well, that was hideous for me. It did not work at all because, first of all, I might spend 2 hours in the Bible in the morning because I got into something that I couldn't get out. Or I might check my emails and then suddenly there's some tragedy or some emergency that I've got to take care of. So I've spent more than that. And so I could never make it work like that.
Right.
So my husband came up with this idea for me and it works. So what I do is on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I work on our businesses. On one of the 4 companies, I spend the whole day doing whatever has to be done. I keep an up-to-date schedule, and I do whatever I have to do on those companies. On Tuesdays and Thursdays and Saturdays, if I have the Saturday free, I write. Mm-hmm. What that does for me is, first of all, it gives me permission not to work on the company that day. So it's Tuesday, I'm not at the office, even though I'm maybe sitting right here. But it's Tuesday, I'm not at the office. So that gives me permission. And the second thing it does is it allows me sort of ramp up time, to get my engines going and get started, because I need that. I need to sort of get into the groove before I write, and it really works for me. And that's the solution we found. And other people have other solutions. I have one friend who decides that when she's going to write the next book, she's already gathered as much information as she can, and then for like 3 or 4 months, that's all she does. She doesn't do anything else but write for that time. And she might write early in the morning, all day long, late at night. She gives up a lot of stuff during that period of time, but she gets it written. So that's one way to do it.
Yeah.
And other people that, have full-time jobs, their Saturdays are their writing day. And they get up Saturday morning and everybody knows to leave them in the office where they are so that they can write. So if you get the cooperation of your family and you figure out what works for you, then you can make it work. You can make time to write. And it's so important that you do.
Yes, and I think that's the thing that I teach too, is be intentional. Just don't expect that writing time is going to drop in your lap and all these words are going to flow out. If you don't plan a time to write, something's going to fill that time, whether it's Netflix, family, the email, work, whatever will fill that time. And if you aren't intentional in setting that time, and that's what I tell people like you don't necessarily have to be rigid. It doesn't have to say from 11 to 1 on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturday, I'm going to write. Yeah. If that's not going to work for you, because I like routine. I don't like schedules, if that makes sense. I like doing things in a certain order, but I may start at 9 one day and I may start at 11 the next day. It may start at 8 one day because I'm not an early riser, and I will be up late at night, and that's when my brain's going and grooving, and I can get stuff done, and it's quiet. Nobody's bothering me. So you just got to figure out those times that work. Exactly. I love that. So now that you've said that, you've told us a little bit about this. What do you, with your writing time? So when you said Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays if you're home, do you have a place that's your favorite place to write? What do you work on? Do you structure your time, or how does your writing time work? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it sort of depends on what I'm writing. If I'm writing nonfiction, I have done a lot of preliminary work. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is for months and months and months, I have been thinking about the subject. And I typically have a folder for each chapter. And if I come across an article or a quote or something or scripture or something that I think might fit in that scripture, I drop it in that folder. And I'm actually using Evernote for that now, but I used to physically have folders. And so whenever I sit down to write that chapter, I already have lots of information, and then I can pull it together. So that's the structure when I write a nonfiction, because I've already structured the table of contents, the contents of each chapter, and then I've added all these stories and illustrations and other things that make it rich. So
yeah,
that's how I do that. Yeah.
Then it's kind of like fill in the blank,
Yeah. Now, I have not published a novel, but I'm writing a novel, I should put it that way. And that writing is pure pleasure. It is storytelling at its utmost, which is one of my favorite things. And it is also, it's more, for me, it's more seat of the pants. I sort of I don't have a plot. I understand that there are plotters and there are pantsers. I'm a pantser, I think, but I have a general idea of where I think the story's going, and I start writing scenes. And I would say that I've written about 60,000 words so far in this novel, but I would say probably 15,000 of them are never going to see the light of day. But they are things I needed to know about, stories I needed to know about the character.
Right.
As I built that character and what happened, the experiences that character had. So I probably won't ever use those in the book. I might use them later in some promotional way, but I had to write them just from the creative standpoint of understanding where this person came from and what they've experienced. So, that's kind of discouraging to say I've written 60,000 and maybe 20,000 of it is not good, but that's okay too. So I do that for me is more of just writing a scene and let it happen.
Right.
It fits in my sort of overall structure, which is not a very formal plot. So that's not true of a lot of writers. A lot of writers plot it out. Novels, fiction, they plot it out and they pretty much know what's going to happen everywhere.
Right.
They fill in the blanks. So,
well, I've got one in the works too, so I understand. But what you're talking about, I did do that for a lot of the backstory. I kind of I used a book that prompted some questions, and it asked. So I'd ask my character these questions, and then I would answer them as if I was the character, and it brought this whole other dimension into my story that I had not even thought about till I answered that question from my character's point of view. And so that's the fun part about fiction is you can go off on these little rabbit trails and it'll lead you places that you like, ooh, that would be great, this part of the book, And so
I heard a very famous writer say he was just typing along and a character died, and he said he looked up and he said, I didn't know he was going to die. I remember thinking, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Of course you do. You're the writer, but it really happens. When you're writing these scenes, the characters sort of take over, which is great fun. But I have no idea whether it's ever going to be a marketable book, but it's great. It's a great creative endeavor.
it is.
I do like doing it. One of the things I do, Joyce, that I would really encourage any writer who's listening is to read books on the craft. And speaking, but of writing. So I have hundreds of these books. And if I hear about a new one, I get it and read it. And so I made up my mind years ago when I went to my first writers conference, which was in Florida many years ago. And there was a man there. He was older, and he obviously had everybody's respect as he stood before. You could tell that everybody in the audience just respected this man. I have no idea who it was, to tell the truth. But I remember thinking, these people really respect this guy. And so he sort of spoke to us about being a writer, and he said, I have read one book on the craft of writing every month since I was 21 years old or something. And I was stunned by that. I was like, well, you're the expert. You're the one everybody looks up to. Why are you reading a book every month? And then it dawned on me, of course, that's why he was.
That's why he's the expert, because he's been reading it and practicing, yeah.
So I made up my mind I was going to do that. So every month I read a book. about the craft of writing. And I've read many really good ones and some that, maybe not so much. But some I read over and over because it is so good for me to understand the craft of writing, the job of writing. And so if anybody wants to become a better writer, that's my advice.
I love it.
Every month, read a new book or an old one, but read a book on the craft. And I have both writing and speaking because those are my expertise areas. So, but I read a book on the craft every month.
Yeah, I love that. And I don't know about you, when I read one of those, it inspires me and it gives me some thoughts like, ooh, I could do this with my story, or I could do that with my story, or I could write a book about this,
Right.
And it gets your creative.
Almost no place better to get ideas.
Gets it going. So, well, you've given us the advice of reading a book a month or as many as they can. What other words of advice would you have for new writers, or maybe someone who's struggling to write a book? Maybe they've written one, and they're on the next one, but they're kind of having a hard time. What encouragement and advice would you have for them?
Well, I think two things. One is write. Find the time and do it. Do the writing. There's nothing will grow you better. But number two, and I've just come to believe this. Go to writers' conferences. Mm-hmm. And here's the thing. As an editor who acquires books and from writers like you, it is so powerful to me when you have been to a writers' conference and you have listened to people talk about not only the craft of writing, but also about the industry and the procedures and how publishing happens and how editors work and how publishers work and why publishers do what they do and accept or reject or make moves like that. Because over these 8 years that we've had this company, I've discovered that when I bought a book from somebody who did not know those details and did not understand the industry, it has caused us great grief just in dealing with that author and in the success of the book. Mm-hmm. If you don't understand those areas, then you really don't understand what you're doing. Okay, you might be a great writer, it might be good, but that's not what sells a book.
Right.
That's a big part of it. It is one part. So, I don't think I'll ever acquire another book unless I find out how many times this person has been to a writer's conference and what they've learned. Mm-hmm. Just because our jobs are hard, our jobs as publishers are really tough, and we don't need the kind of struggle that we would get from somebody who just doesn't understand the industry. And so, I just tell you that way because it's really important. I think go to these conferences, spend the money, invest in yourself as a writer.
Right.
You'll meet other writers, people who do what you do. You'll really love that, and you'll learn so much.
You'll meet fabulous people like Karen. So it was fun, and that's what I've enjoyed every conference I've ever been to. I get just as much, if not more, from the connections I make at a conference than I do from the content. I always get valuable content from the conference, from the classes and the keynotes. But the connections that you make, they're important. I mean, because there's that support. And Karen's giving you the other side of the view here from the publisher side. So if you want to be traditionally published, listen up. They do not want to have to hold your hand and teach you everything that you should already know by the time you get to their door. So that's how you do it.
That's kind of a new revelation for me. But, but I believe that it's a new criteria that we have to have. We have to have somebody who is at least familiar with the terminologies and the way things work.
Right. Because and that's kind of the thing that surprises me. And I know there was a lot of newbies at the conference that we were at recently, but some of the things that they didn't know, and I'm thinking, how long have you been writing? Because I don't know.
I have a couple of several authors who have we have published their book and they don't understand. And,
Yeah.
one of the things is that they don't understand that this is, while we're Christian, this is not a ministry.
Right.
And unfortunately, we have to make tough decisions sometimes because it is a business.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I so appreciate you being here and your words of encouragement and wisdom for us. It's been fabulous, and I look forward to going through your study with my study group. So thank you again.
It's great fun. If you give a girl a giant, it's a really remarkable story.
Yes.
In the Bible.
I love it. I love how you read the different giants have the different meanings and how you.
Excuse me.
That's okay. But that was great, and I look forward to studying that. So definitely, and I'll have a link in the show notes for people to get that book too, so they can find out more about it. But thank you again, Karen, and you have a great day.
You too.
All
Bye.
right.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Right Hour. Are you wondering how to start your writing journey but feel overwhelmed or confused? After taking 4 years to write her first book, Joyce completely understands. She created the 4 steps to the right book to help you clarify your focus, create and organize your content, and complete your book. She shares tips on the writing process, and you can download the Writing Planner to track your progress and create weekly and monthly milestones to complete your book. You can sign up for the short email series at thewritecoach.biz. That's TheWriteCoach.biz. Or go to the link in the show notes for the podcasts. You can sign up on the side pop out on the computer, or on the phone, it's a blue bar at the bottom that pops up. You can also go to the bottom of the homepage to sign up for the 4 steps to the right book. Don't let fear and overwhelm stop you from writing your book. It's time to write your book.